Engagement parties are supposed to feel warm. This one felt like an evaluation. My best friend's engagement was held in a glass-walled hall overlooking the city, the kind of place where success looked effortless and everyone dressed like they already belonged to the future. I arrived early, as usual, because being early meant fewer questions. Fewer chances for people to ask what I was doing with my life. I stood near the drinks table, adjusting my sleeves, watching groups form naturally. Investors with investors, couples with couples, achievers with achievers. I knew where I fit in that invisible hierarchy. Somewhere polite. Somewhere ignorable. My best friend spotted me across the room and smiled. A real smile. He always had that way of making me feel like I wasn't a mistake for existing. He hugged me, thanked me for coming, then got pulled away by relatives, congratulations, expectations. I didn't mind. I was used to being the pause between other people's moments. As the room filled, the conversations grew louder. Promotions. Startups. Property. Plans that sounded permanent. When people asked me what I did, it was never curiosity, it was context gathering. A way to place me correctly in their mental filing cabinet. I'm working on something, I said, the same answer I'd been giving for years. They smiled politely and moved on. That's when his fiancée's cousin approached me, drink in hand, confidence loud enough to be mistaken for charm. He had already decided who I was before we finished shaking hands. So, he said, leaning in slightly, why are you still, nothing? He laughed as if he'd said something clever. A few people nearby chuckled too. The word nothing didn't sting because it was new. It stung because it was familiar. It carried years of assumptions with it. Years of being explained away. Years of silence mistaken for stagnation. I felt the old reflex rise. The urge to joke, to deflect, to make them comfortable. Instead, I took a slow sip of my drink. I'm not, I said calmly. He raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? Doing what exactly? The group leaned in. Not aggressively. Casually. The way people do when they think they're about to hear an excuse. Building, I replied. That earned a few smirks. Sure, he said. Aren't we all? Before I could respond, someone tapped a glass at the front of the room. The host stepped up, asking everyone to gather closer for a short announcement. Relief washed over me. Not because I was afraid, but because timing mattered and I knew when not to speak. As people moved toward the center, the cousin gave me one last look. Hey, he said, lowering his voice, no offense. Some people just peak early. I smiled. Genuinely. Some peak loudly, I said. Some peak quietly. He didn't understand what I meant. Neither did anyone else in that room. The host cleared his throat and began thanking family members, sponsors, mentors. Names were mentioned. Applause followed. Cameras flashed. The future was being celebrated out loud. Then the host paused, glancing down at his phone, frowning slightly. Actually, he said, before we continue, we have one more thing. The room hushed. He looked toward the entrance. We're just waiting on someone to arrive. My phone vibrated in my pocket. One message. One word. Ready. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and lifted my gaze. Across the room, the cousin was still smiling, confident, relaxed, certain that whatever was coming next had nothing to do with him. Or me. He was wrong. Because the contract he thought didn't exist had already been signed. And the room was about to find out who I really was. The doors at the back of the hall opened quietly. No dramatic entrance. No announcement. Just a subtle shift that people felt before they noticed it. A few heads turned. Then a few more. Conversations slowed, then stopped altogether as a small group walked in, 2 men in tailored suits and a woman holding a slim leather folder close to her chest. They didn't look lost. They didn't scan the room. They walked straight toward the host. My best friend noticed first. His expression changed, not excitement, not confusion, but recognition. He knew that look. The look of people who weren't here to celebrate. They were here to conclude something. The cousin who had laughed earlier leaned toward me again. "Friends of yours," he whispered, amused. I met his eyes calmly. "They are now." The host glanced at the folder, then at my best friend, then back at the newcomers. His smile tightened, but he nodded. He raised the microphone again, this time without tapping it. "Thank you for waiting," he said. "We've just received confirmation on something that couldn't be delayed." The room leaned in. The woman stepped forward and handed him the folder. He opened it, skimmed the first page, then looked up, directly at me. "For transparency," he said slowly, "this announcement involves a contract finalized moments ago." A murmur rippled through the hall. The cousin frowned. "What contract?" The host didn't answer him. He continued reading. "Effective immediately," he said, "a strategic partnership has been signed between Orion Dynamics and..." He paused. "Her." He said my name. Out loud. Clearly. In a room that had just called me nothing. The sound of it landed differently than laughter ever had. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. My best friend turned toward me fully now, eyes wide, searching my face for confirmation. The host cleared his throat. "This partnership represents a 7-figure commitment, signed tonight, granting controlling interest and operational authority effective immediately." Silence swallowed the room. The cousin's smile vanished. "That's not possible," he muttered. "She said she was building." "I did," I replied quietly. The woman from the group stepped forward. "For context," she said, professional and composed, "this agreement was negotiated over the past 18 months. Tonight was simply the final signature." 18 months. People started connecting dots they hadn't known existed. My parents weren't there. My family wasn't there. And for the first time, that felt like freedom instead of absence. The host looked uncomfortable now. "Would you like to say a few words?" I stood. Not rushed. Not shaking. I walked toward the microphone the same way I had earlier, only this time, no one laughed. They watched. Closely. "I won't take long," I said. "Tonight isn't about proving anyone wrong." That felt like a lie to some of them. I let it. "I was asked earlier why I was still nothing," I continued calmly. I didn't answer then because explanations rarely change minds that have already decided. A few faces reddened. "But contracts do," I added. The cousin stared at the floor. "This partnership," I said, "isn't an arrival. It's a confirmation. Of work done quietly. Of time spent building when no one was watching." I paused, letting the weight settle. I hope tonight reminds us that not every future announces itself loudly. I handed the microphone back and returned to my place. No applause followed. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because applause would have admitted guilt. People stood in stunned clusters now. Conversations restarted, but they were fractured, uncertain. The cousin avoided my side of the room completely. My best friend hugged me tightly, whispering, "You did this without telling anyone." I smiled. That was the point. The night didn't end there. It couldn't. Because success revealed in public doesn't just change how people see you. It forces them to reevaluate every moment they thought they understood. And for some of them, that realization was only beginning. The room never recovered. Not fully. Not that night. People tried to pretend it was still an engagement party, but the illusion had cracked. Smiles felt rehearsed. Laughter came too late or not at all. Conversations circled the same subject without naming it. Every few minutes, someone glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if eye contact might confirm something they weren't ready to accept. The cousin who had called me nothing left early. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't have to. His silence said more than any apology ever could. My best friend stayed close to me for the rest of the evening. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine disbelief mixed with pride. "You planned all of this," he said quietly, not accusing, admiring. "I planned my work," I replied. "Tonight was just timing." By the end of the night, messages started coming in. Not congratulations, those came later. First came confusion. Then curiosity. Then carefully worded interest. People who had never asked me a single question about my life were suddenly eager to understand my vision, my plans, my future. I didn't answer most of them. I didn't need to. Because the contract didn't just change how they saw me. It changed how I saw myself. In the days that followed, the shift became permanent. Invitations arrived that had never existed before. Meetings were scheduled with people who previously wouldn't have remembered my name. And the best part wasn't the access, it was the absence of doubt. I no longer felt the need to prepare explanations in advance or soften my achievements to avoid discomfort. The cousin tried to reach out once. A short message. Casual. Pretending the night hadn't mattered as much as it had. I didn't respond. Some doors close themselves when you stop holding them open. My best friend and his fiancée visited me a week later. They didn't apologize for anyone. They didn't need to. They simply said what mattered. "We never doubted you," he said. I believed him. What stayed with me most, though, wasn't the public moment or the contract itself. It was the realization that silence had never been my weakness. It had been my filter. It kept the wrong people comfortable and the right people curious. I didn't peak loudly. I didn't arrive with warnings. I didn't announce myself. I built. And when the moment came, the truth didn't need defending. It spoke for itself, clearly, irreversibly. They asked why I was still nothing. Minutes later, the contract was signed. And in that gap between those two moments, the story they told about me ended.